Summary.
Preface. In this note to the reader, Christensen explains his reason for writing The Innovator's Dilemma. In 1990, he asked himself two questions that would shape the book. Why is success so difficult to sustain? And is successful innovation really as unpredictable as the data suggests?
His graduate research led to some unsettling answers.
First, it's often good management strategies that lead to a company's demise, listening to the customer and focusing on products that yield high returns.
Doing the right thing can be the wrong thing.
To answer his second question, Christensen urges his readers to look at innovation as something that is inherently unpredictable, as opposed to a risk to be managed.
With the help of data, we can more clearly read where innovation is going and which companies will fail and which will succeed.
The purpose of The Innovator's Dilemma is to help innovators, entrepreneurs, and investors know what to look for, what information to collect, what data to mine, and how to interpret that information so that they can develop profitable services and products and run successful companies. The Innovator's Dilemma is the result of years of research, tested and improved by hundreds of students, investors, innovators, consultants, academics, and executives. However, the theory of disruption can always be improved upon, and Christensen challenges each and every reader to continue the research in their own lives.
Introduction.
The Innovator's Dilemma is about why great firms fail when faced with critical market and technological innovation. An example cited is Sears Roebuck, who introduced credit cards and mail order catalogs only to lose those markets to Visa and MasterCard, along with a long list of new catalog merchants. The key principle regarding technological innovation is the difference between sustaining technology and disruptive technology. Well-managed companies routinely drive sustaining technological improvements, including incremental and breakthrough improvements, in their existing product lines.
They are following sound business practices within the context of their organization, their customers, and the overall market for their products and services.
On the other hand, disruptive technologies are typically cheaper, simpler, and more user-friendly. They often enter at the low-cost, low-margin side of the market where larger organizations have limited or no motivation or even capability to step in. Yet it is the disruptive businesses that capture new consumer segments and then start to move into the markets once owned by larger companies that, over time, leave legacy companies behind.
Part 1. Why great companies fail. 1. How can great firms fail? Insights from the hard disk drive industry.
Few industries have faced such a relentless march of performance improvements, sales growth, and market changes as the hard disk drive industry. In its nascent stage in the 1950s, it expanded with new players in the field over time. From 1976 to 1995, only one of the original 17 leaders in the industry remained, IBM.
Another 129 firms had entered the industry during this period, with 109 of those failing.
This rapid turnover in technology and organizations, coupled with detailed market information published by Disk/Trend Report, made this industry a fertile field for exploring the central question of the book, How Do Great Firms Fail? Clayton Christensen identifies two types of technological change, sustaining and disruptive. In the former, leading firms have always led the industry in implementing and commercializing sustaining innovations. However, with disruptive technology improvements, the opportunities and the market applications are so uncertain and so limited in size that only smaller entry-level companies consider them worth their time and money. Yet time after time, these smaller organizations are able to establish a market with their disruptive innovation and move up the value scale to take ever-increasing business from the existing organizations.
Sustaining technology improvements meet existing customers' needs with marked benefits, but ignore the needs of potential customers.
Disruptive technology improvements are often at the low end of the market and typically find applications where the technology was not previously mechanically or economically feasible. They do not need to be massive breakthroughs, but are instead new applications in new or emerging markets. 2. Value networks and the impetus to innovate. While some firms fail because of leadership or organizational issues, and others due to lack of experience with emerging technologies, here Christensen explains the concept of the value network and how it affects the potential for failure in established or legacy companies. A value network is the framework of an organization established to create profit through its products and services. Consisting of people and technologies, it also forms the basis for the reward structure established within an organization. Think of a value network as all the physical components in a flat-screen TV or all of the parts that go into a microchip in the flat-screen TV. A value network may also be the manufacturers and markets involved in the business of smartphones, including customers, designers, advertisers, and salespeople. If existing customers can't readily see the value of a disruptive innovation, they won't adopt it and the organization will most often drop it from their product development plans. Additionally, if the potential product does not meet the firm's standard cost structure, chiefly in terms of gross profit margin, it is not likely to be considered for further development. All of these aspects serve to channel the resource allocation and investment decisions of the organization toward sustaining improvements that meet existing customer needs within existing applications.
In these environments, disruptive innovations can't possibly make the cut.
The message here seems to be, go outside of your existing customer base when exploring new product rollouts, and be aware of competition that might be coming from agile startups, even those that have not achieved any economy of scale. 3. Disruptive technological change in the mechanical excavator industry. In this chapter, Christensen moves into a different industry, mechanical excavators, to examine the results of disruptive innovation and to demonstrate that these principles apply across many fields. In this case, the sustaining technology example is steam shovels that use cables to activate the machinery. The sustaining improvements included moving from steam engine power to gasoline engine and then to diesel-electric power. He notes that 23 of the largest 25 manufacturers successfully made the transition to gasoline power.
The disruptive improvement was moving from cable to hydraulic actuators.
Hydraulic actuators cannot match the lift capacity of cable actuators, which was the major sustaining improvement area for existing firms and their customers. Instead, makers of hydraulic actuators found new markets that valued their small size and high maneuverability. This included small residential contractors who used them to dig plumbing runs, basements, and foundations. These applications greatly cut their construction time in a niche that couldn't afford the time and cost of a major cable-driven mechanical excavator. In this case study, the drive by existing firms in the mechanical excavator market was based on their value network of meeting the needs of existing customers and achieving profitability levels needed to justify sustaining improvements.
As such, hydraulic activators didn't make sense.
Yet new entrants in the field started with small markets, developed them, and then started to move up market to compete and excel where old line firms once ruled.
4. What goes up, can't go down.
Here the case is made that organizations typically allocate resources toward proposed products that are expected to provide high margins and increased sales. An example from the disk drive industry was that firms providing products to mini-computer manufacturers required gross margins of 40%.
Those providing products to desktop computer makers needed 25%, while the mainframe market was used to 60%.
Given these choices, those firms with already lower cost structures would be driven to move up market toward the higher margins.
Never would they consider taking their higher cost structure to a less profitable market.
This seems to emphasize the point that what goes up can't go down, especially when working familiar territory. However, good managers will choose higher returns that can be capitalized upon from lower cost structures. They will recognize innovative ideas from any level within their organization and be open to funding the development of products and services that drive revenue from the lower end of the market, as in the case of minimal steel manufacturing, small, disruptive companies investing in technologies to providing low-end steel, versus integrated mills, large legacy companies with established consumers of high-end steel. What Christensen demonstrates in this example is how established businesses, such as USX and Bethlehem Steel, have focused on creating internal efficiencies and cutting costs, while servicing the same high-end market they've always sold to, while newcomers, able to achieve similar cost-effectiveness out of the gate, while selling to consumers of low-end steel. The integrated mills were not interested in manufacturing bars and beams, and so the mini-mills were able to fill this market need and excel at it.
Part 2. Managing disruptive technological change.
Here Christensen suggests that good management is the root cause of organizational failure in the face of disruptive technology, which comes from making sound resource allocation decisions that address customer needs within their existing value network. The win will come to those companies that are able to shift the way they work and the way individuals and teams are evaluated. Your organization may be destined to fail if
your current customer base prevents innovation and experimentation.
the potential for smaller markets are not recognized.
A prospective use for a new product or service cannot be defined up front.
Your organizational capabilities are too rigid for addressing disruptive change.
There is hesitation about stepping into emerging markets. Successful managers harnessed these principles by aligning disruptive technology with customers who needed them,
Placing the disruptive technology projects within organizations small enough to be excited and motivated by small wins. Learning through inexpensive experimentation and being open to early failures in identifying markets, products, and applications. Avoiding the larger organization's processes and values, instead using a smaller organization whose cost structure could be better aligned with these smaller opportunities. Finding or developing new markets rather than trying to wedge the disruptive technology into their main markets. 5. Give responsibility for disruptive technologies to organizations whose customers need them. The theory of resource dependence posits that an organization's freedom of action is limited to those actions that satisfy the needs of their customers and investors, who provide the resources the organization needs to survive. Within this framework, disruptive technology that customers do not want and that investors won't support due to its unknown value is bound to fail. The alternative is to place the disruptive technology initiatives within an organization whose customers want the new technology and whose staff, processes, and resources value the small gains as they develop new products for new markets. Case studies in this chapter include disk drive technology with spin-off and new organizations, discount retailing with gross margins that differ from traditional retailing, and laser printers versus inkjet printers from two separate organizations within Hewlett-Packard.
Though it may seem counterintuitive, companies need to look beyond their current clients when deciding which initiatives should be funded.
An organization's value network must be aligned to support a disruptive technology. This can best be done by spinning off or launching new teams dedicated to a disruptive technology that's not connected to traditional resource allocation.
This enables flexibility in development and resource dependence for an entity that can grapple effectively with the challenges inherent in finding and building new markets.
6. Match the size of the organization to the size of the market. In the world of disk drives, companies that entered disruptive value networks within the first 2 years were 6 times more likely to succeed than later rivals. Unfortunately for large organizations, the early years of a disruptive market offer the least incentives for entry.
There are 3 ways for a large company to overcome this challenge.
Grow an emerging market big enough and quickly enough to make a meaningful difference to the overall revenue of the business. Wait until the market is large enough to justify entry, but recognize that the likelihood of success for late entrants is much lower than for the leaders. Assign disruptive technology to an independent team that's small enough to be motivated by early successes, and foster a culture where the early failures do not deter continued investment.
7. Discovering new and emerging markets. Disruptive technology finds and creates new markets.
Since those new markets don't exist until they coalesce around the disruptive technology, they cannot be analyzed up front.
They are, in fact, unknowable. Within this context, traditional strategic business and marketing plans cannot be created.
Instead, planning must be focused on a cycle of learning and discovery. The first case study in this chapter focuses on Hewlett-Packard's development of a 1.3-inch disk drive for the emerging personal digital assistant, PDA, market as represented by the Apple Newton in the early 1990s. The market for both the PDA and the drive didn't materialize.
What did emerge were applications in miniature cash registers, cameras, and mass-market video game systems.
But this market for disruptive technology demanded pricing at $50 per drive versus the $250 per drive unit that HP originally developed for the PDA market. Additional case studies in this chapter included Honda's entry into the US motorcycle market, creating the disruptive market for small engine off-road bikes, and Intel's introduction of the microprocessor. The key concept is that markets for disruptive technologies emerge from unanticipated successes, and those are often preceded by failures. Hits can be made with the employment of discovery-driven planning with modest initial investments in trials to conserve resources, followed by adjustments to plans to take advantage of discoveries. It's ready, fire, aim in action.
8. How to appraise your organization's capabilities and disabilities. How do you know if an organization is capable of successfully executing the work it is given?
This assessment of people has been a hallmark of sound management practice, when followed by the necessary coaching and training, but business leaders seldom consider that organizations, too, have capabilities and disabilities. To assess a company, and evaluate what it can and cannot excel at, consider the quality of its resources. This would include staff, intellectual property, physical space, equipment, finances, and the network in which it operates. Processes, methods for producing value out of products or services, and running the business.
Values. At the core of an organization, its values, when communicated widely, should influence how individuals prioritize and make decisions.
These same capabilities, which are the source of success for the organization, may also define what they cannot do. Imagine a business focused on sustaining or traditional technologies that has honed its people and processes in a particular way, and whose management team expects a certain return on their investment. This type of organization is unlikely to be flexible enough to change its people or processes to accommodate disruptive technologies, and is equally not suited to take risks associated with new models and markets. Christensen suggests how to create new organizational capabilities.
Acquire an organization that matches the task at hand.
Try to change the current organization capabilities. Create a spin-off organization and instill the new values within it.
9. Performance provided, market demand, and the product life cycle.
Performance oversupply occurs when a developed technology exceeds market needs, signaling a change in the basis of competition, and opens the door for disruptive technology to jump in. This is shown within the product life cycle, where there is a buying hierarchy that follows 4 distinct phases: functionality, reliability, convenience, and price. In the disk drive market, the early focus was on the functionality of capacity and physical size. As these were satisfied, reliability became crucial, and then price became the primary purchase motivator. Case studies include Intuit's entrance into the accounting market and extending that to personal financial management software, and Eli Lilly's work improving the effectiveness of insulin. In the latter case, from 1925 to 1980, Lilly steadily improved the purity of insulin derived from animals. Then, at great expense, they created a 100% pure insulin produced with biotechnology priced at a 25% premium.
Response in the consumer market was poor. When Novo introduced a line of insulin pens for injection, they disrupted the status quo and turned what had been a 2 to 3 minute effort into one that took only seconds. Priced at a 30% premium, the product met with substantial success.
This demonstrates that the sustaining technology's performance exceeded market demand, while the disruptive technology entered through being more convenient, and did so at a higher price. Successfully implementing disruptive technology should be framed as a marketing challenge rather than a technology challenge. Disruptive technology seldom matches the capability of mainstream products. Instead, it creates new markets where its capabilities fit the potential application.
It is typically simpler, more reliable, and convenient than existing technology, resulting in lower costs.
10. Managing disruptive technological change, a case study. This chapter brings all the information presented in the previous chapters into play within a hypothetical case study focused on the development of electric vehicles. Christensen uses this industry to demonstrate how he might approach such a potentially disruptive initiative from inside an established automotive company. The first step is analytical. Determine if a technology is actually disruptive by examining the current market and observing consumer behaviors.
One would also need to determine if there is a path to moving from niche to mainstream use.
If you discover that, over time, the performance of an electric car business could outpace, not just match, the mainstream market, you'll know that the potential for disruption is there. When considering defining a market strategy for your innovative endeavor, you'll want to keep simplicity and convenience in mind, as well as the ability to change direction as the marketplace shifts. And in any organization where resources, financial, technical, human, are limited, it is imperative to move beyond rational resource allocation to provide proper support for an emerging business.
11. The Dilemmas of Innovation, a Summary.
Clayton M. Christensen provides a summary of the insights provided throughout the book, noting that they initially seem counterintuitive at first, but make sense after closer inspection, when they reveal themselves as simple and sensible. The progress demanded by markets may be different from that offered by technology. Customers only know what they need today, not what they may need or want tomorrow.
Managing innovation is about resource allocation within an organization. Priorities will pick the winners and the winners will match the organization's existing value network. Moving disruptive technology to market requires finding the market that values the technology.
Organizations have specialized capabilities and value networks that establish how they respond to opportunities.
As a result, they are resistant to taking on disruptive change that requires a completely different value network.
Solid research about emerging markets and their reception of disruptive technology doesn't exist. Risk is very high and requires quick, inexpensive, flexible entry, followed by adjustments for new attempts. Blanket technology strategies of always being a leader or a follower have limited usefulness when faced with the differences between sustaining and disruptive technologies. Leadership in disruptive technologies can offer significant rewards, while leading sustaining technologies offer fewer. Established organizations have strong built-in barriers to entering disruptive markets, which can be a significant advantage for entrants to those emerging markets.
This insight differs substantially from that traditionally offered by economists.
Τώρα μωρέ μαμά. Εντάξει έλα. Κάνει ζέστη. Κάνει ζέστη, τι να σου κάνω. Πολύ ζέστη κάνει τώρα. Βγάλει το παντελόνι. Πρέπει να... Εδώ. Όχι, όχι, άστο. Κάνει ζέστη. Για να το ανοίξει. Όχι, για να το κλείσει, κάνει ζέστη πολύ. Εντάξει, θα ανοίξω το air condition. Θέλω air condition. Εγώ, να ανοίξουμε. Άστο, παιδί μου, φυσά τώρα. Ανοίξουμε air condition. Άστο, θέλει. Κάνει πάρα πολύ ζέστη. Φυσά πολύς αέρας. Κάτσε τώρα. Πάμε ησυχία τώρα να κάνει δουλειά. Εντάξει. Θέλεις νερό, Λαλούκα? Καρπούζι? Έχει.